Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome back to the Husker Big Red podcast here on the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. And I am Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette. And Danny, how you doing on this Monday morning, President's Day? It's kind of a big day where you're from in Massachusetts, isn't it?
It is. A lot of people have the day off, but Husker Athletics never has a day off. So here we are. We got a big weekend to recap. We got some basketball. We have some blown opportunities by the baseball team, although you've put a more positive spin on it than I have. So I look forward to that. And we have some recruiting news. So as much as there's a day off, it's never a day off in Nebraska. And where are we going to start? We're going to start with some recruiting.
We can start. Well, maybe we should recap the weekend really quick, and then we can dive into some recruiting. Before I guess we do that, guys, though, please make sure to like the channel and please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Off to a roaring start here, but anyways, I guess we should say for the baseball team, they're not off to necessarily a roaring start. They did play well though. Won the first game against Baylor, and then lost to Texas Tech 6-3 on Saturday. It was 3-3 going into the ninth, and then they had I believe a 5-3 lead or a 6-3 lead going into the ninth, and ended up losing to Oklahoma. So 7-6 yesterday. So 6-3 lead actually. So there were some positive things. Just need to finish like Will Bolt said, get that killer instinct or whatever. But what were your thoughts on the weekend? Some starting pitching. Not bad, but the relief looks like that might be an issue.
It's the same story as last year, kind of, right? And I feel like we heard Will Bolt say, we just got to finish a lot last year. It sounds pretty familiar. We've heard that said on the football aspect of things before, but I mean, they did. There were some positives. I mean, Texas Tech was ranked, and they did beat Baylor, so it wasn't all bad. It's just you want to see them secure those wins because as much as it is a long season, those are golden opportunities to win. I thought this weekend it did show some promising signs. I thought the bats looked pretty good. I thought that the pitching held its own, and I think that a guy like Dylan Carey is going to be. He had a decent weekend. I think he's going to be a pretty solid player for them this year. Tyler Stone. I mean, Garrett Angleem had an RBI against Texas Tech, so he's continuing to swing the bat well. And I think the problem for the last couple seasons for Nebraska baseball is that they just can't get the pitching and the hitting going at the same time. And I know it sounds kind of simplistic, but if they can do that, then they'll be in a much better spot. It's not all bad this weekend, but you definitely would want to see them kind of take advantage of some golden opportunities that they had that they just let slip away.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at a team maybe that's trying to get in a large berth later in the year. That win over Texas Tech, if they could have got it, would have been a real feather in their cap. One thing looking back, over 3 games, they scored 13 runs, which isn't a ton in college baseball. You're probably, that's barely over 4 runs a game. And Will Bolt talked about how they need to try to get more offense early on in matchups. And, I kind of agree with that, but I'm not too worried about their offense. I think that will come. And the starting pitching, I think I do feel good about the fact that they were in position to win all 3 of those games. I do think that, Rob Childress is, they obviously brought him here for a reason as the pitching coach. Going to have a little bit of work to do with that bullpen. They have some new faces there, but there were some positives. I thought Evan Borst, had a solid inning, had some solid, got out of some situations there. So overall, I think, it could be last year they were 0-3-1 to start, and 2 years ago they were 1-3. So could have been worse, but also, could have been better. But yeah, they definitely need to get, some more wins in the non-conference though, because the Big Ten is not known for baseball strength. So you're only going to get a few teams. So you need to try to get quality wins in non-conference play, if you want to be in a large team anyway. Otherwise, you got to be like a top 2 team in the Big Ten. And that's, they haven't been able to pull that off the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And, I think that, as far as the starting pitching, like you mentioned, was concerned, I was very impressed. I think guys like Tucker Timmerman. Timmerman had a good weekend. You know, Brett Sears, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, had a good weekend, and so there were definitely positive signs. And it is a little bit tough to kind of get some wins out of the gate when you're facing the number 21 team, for example. But I mean, the fact that they had a chance to win these games certainly has me encouraged. Offense is not going to be an issue. I mean, and Gleam is absolutely, raking. Caden Brumbaugh is also playing his part as well. So I'm not too worried about the offense. It's going to be, for me, the back end of that bullpen as they get the new faces in there. And, starting pitching, I think, is going to be pretty good this year. So as long as they can hold the lead, I think that's going to be a mantra we're going to be saying for the entirety of the season.
Yeah, definitely, and it's at least fun to have baseball back, and to recap some other things that happened. Obviously, this weekend, Nebraska basketball gets a 19-point win over Penn State. The defense really shined in that one, so that was impressive.
Yeah.
The NET rankings, especially take margin of victory into consideration. You can only get nothing above 20 points really matters. So the fact that Nebraska won that game by 19, that improved their NET ranking by 3 spots. That improved their KenPom ranking by like 6, which doesn't matter for NCAA rankings. But the fact that they're ranked 40th in the KenPom, I mean, I think that shows how good this team is. So that they're definitely passing the eye test in terms of, making the NCAA tournament, in my opinion. And then really quickly too, the women, they got destroyed by Ohio State on Wednesday, which, Ohio State is really good, but they fell behind by 10 points. You got to give them credit. They came back and got a big road win against Purdue. Alexis Markowski had 20 points and 22 rebounds. Jazz Shelley had 18 points. Logan Nisley had 18 as well. So really, the Huskers are kind of coming on strong. I think that win on the road will help solidify their spot in the NCAA tournament. A couple of games left. They're actually sitting in the number 4 spot right now. So they're in a position for a double bye. And the Nebraska men actually are right there too. Michigan State, and I think it's Northwestern was. I think Nebraska's only 1 game out of 3rd place right now. So the way things are kind of trending, if they could steal a win on the road and get 3 out of 4, they still have an opportunity to get the double bye for the Big Ten tournament too. So it was a big weekend for both Nebraska basketball teams.
That Ohio State game for the men later this week, or not this week, next week rather, it's not going to be easy. Ohio State seems to have found some new life after firing Chris Holtman. I mean, I think as far as the Penn State game was concerned, that was their best defensive effort they've had all year. I thought Tominaga did an excellent job on the defensive end, and it was really good to see him kind of shine in that area because we all know he can shine offensively. I think they did a really good job on the glass against Penn State, and that's also encouraging as well. I think they had 11 offensive rebounds, which if you look at some of the other games they played, like Wisconsin, Illinois earlier this month, offensive rebounds and second chance opportunities absolutely killed them. And so getting those offensive rebounds this weekend, for example, was really impressive to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Nebraska, they allowed 49 points to Penn State, but even to go deeper than that, they allow, on average, a point per possession, if you're familiar with, defensive efficiency. And that's, around average. If you're above, if you're allowing 1.1 points per possession, you're probably not going to win the game most of the time. Penn State averaged 0.7 points per possession. So that right there is where Nebraska won the game. Offensively, Nebraska was at 0.98 points per possession, which is actually pretty low for them. That's, they're usually a lot more efficient. So, the fact that they didn't have a great game offensively, but, just came out and totally shut down Penn State, was really, I thought, the defining factor in the game. And they only turned it over on 16% of their possessions. And, Penn State was on 18%. And, if you told me they were going to win, the turnover battle in that game, I probably thought that they would win the game because that's what Penn State does. They led the Big Ten in turnovers. And the fact that, Nebraska still had, like 10 or 11 or whatever, but they did a fairly good job of running the offense. And, defensively, man, if they can keep playing defense like that, they're going to be a very tough team to beat, in the coming weeks and hopefully, into March Madness, into the NCAA tournament.
Tramarcus Lawrence off the bench is becoming a nice asset as well. I thought he played another really good game on Saturday. He looked more like the attacking Lawrence that we're used to seeing. He didn't necessarily just shoot the jump shots. He drove into the lane and used his speed to kind of get some baskets here. And we again, like I said on Saturday, we both weren't sure of the lineup change and if Lawrence would play better off the bench, but he's definitely given them a new, something new and a new look off the bench. And for a guy that was struggling early on, he's taken to the bench role, and the bench role has served him really well.
Yeah, I think it took a minute for them to kind of figure it out, and a big part of that is Casey has to play better defensively, and he has. So
Yeah.
that because Northwestern, I mean, excuse me, not Northwestern, Penn State. I mean, they have some talented guards like Ace Baldwin. So they have some guys. One of their other guards that didn't end up making the trip, I'm blanking on the name, but he was their second leading scorer. So that was a fortunate break for Nebraska. But you look at the defensive ratings of all their guys, Nebraska players. If you're looking at advanced stats, they all did a good job. Keeping basically the defense was at under 0.8 points per possession when almost every player was on the floor. So that's an impressive stat right there. And when you have Sam Hoiberg, Lawrence, and Wiltshire all coming off the bench, playing effectively, it's really interesting because they can play with their big lineup, but then they had a time where they were playing with three guards too. So Fred Hoiberg really has a team that they can mix and match in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of versatility, especially when you can get away with essentially playing Tominaga as your point guard. I mean, they have other guys bring it up, but when he's kind of your only guard out there on the floor and you can get away with that, that's a pretty good thing for the Huskers.
Absolutely. And you wonder, people, and I heard this being a talking point the other day, people were kind of worried about the high school recruiting for the program, but honestly, I think Fred's one of those coaches that is sort of finding more success with the transfer portal. I think high school recruiting is important. Don't get me wrong. It's extremely important. But I think Fred has shown that he doesn't necessarily need a big high school class in order to succeed. And it's kind of interesting because I always think he does better picking players from the transfer portal that fit his style and find his style than he does in terms of recruiting. And early on, he had a lot bigger high school classes and, stuff like that. But now he's focusing more on the portal, and I think it served him well. And this is not a knock on him necessarily, but I kind of wanted to get your take on this. I think he almost does better with more developed players than actually developing players themselves.
Yeah, I think we'll see. I think it's just a case of with Nebraska, it's harder for them to get, the elite players. And then, so it takes long, the players that Nebraska can get, it does take longer for them to kind of, develop and play. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a tough situation. And I just think that with the way college basketball is right now, that you're better off investing more in the portal because you do need immediate, contributors, and the high school players just aren't ready to play college basketball. And so like, I can look, Michigan, I think, is a great example of this, where they had the number one recruiting class a couple of years ago, and they had two guys in that class that got drafted that year as not lottery picks, but they both went in the top 40. But when as freshmen, they were very up and down. They were a bubble team. So those guys, it's not that, they weren't necessarily ready. It's just, I mean, yeah, they aren't ready, I guess, in a lot of ways, because it's a lot of the simple things, that those guys, can make great plays. They can make highlight reel dunks, hit 3-point shots, but sometimes their defensive contest will be bad because in high school, you don't have to contest as hard, or if you're a little bit lazy, the guy's probably not going to hit the 3-point shot on you. But as we've seen with this Nebraska team, if you don't get out and contest in college shooters, like, they're going to make that shot on you more than 50% of the time, even if they're not very good. That's just how the game is played. So I feel like there's a lot of, it's just hard to, have a team of guys built on high school freshmen coming in when they're not ready to play, and other teams all have transfers. So I think he's finding a good mix of, I still think that you want to have, a really talented high school recruit or two that you can kind of build around and try to have as your star player. But I think the other guys need to be supplemented. And he's always done well in the portal. That's how we built a lot of his Iowa State teams. And I think it makes sense because then Nebraska can target these guys from, mid-major programs that maybe were a little bit under-recruited. And now they can come to Nebraska, and it works out both ways because, Nebraska's probably not going to get outside of, I know they got McGowan's, but they're not going to get that level player very often. So I think the transfer portal works out because they can see, some of these, like a Bryce Williams is a great example. Rink Mass is another great example of that. Two guys that were under recruited but proved they could play in that mid-major level. And Fred kind of, identifies, hey, they can actually play in the Big Ten too. So I do think it's a good model that he's found his sweet spot, I'll say.
And it's kind of interesting. I was surfing Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and I was looking at some tweets, and a person from the Wisconsin camp said, quote, "Still can't wrap my head around how Wisconsin allowed Nebraska to come into Wisconsin and get a commitment from Nick Janowski. He is unbelievable and wasn't an untouchable 5-star. Big mistake. The kid is a hooper." And I've seen a lot of statistics from his games, and he's routinely putting up 20. He had 45 one game. So I think he, even though it's a little bit more focused on the transfer portal, I think he's going to come in and make an impact too. I'm really getting excited about Nick Janowski.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's what I'm talking about. The guy who can, develop and potentially be a really good player, or a guy who can at least play somewhat as a freshman. The key is to have him develop and play as a freshman, and then to get him as a sophomore. Like those guys that I was talking about with Michigan, if they could have prevented them from going to the draft, then Michigan would have hit a home run with them as sophomores because they would have dominated. So the key is like getting a guy that's good enough to be an NBA player by year 2, but not good enough to leave after year 1 when he hasn't really done much for you. And so that's with Bryce McGowan's. Bryce McGowan's was like too good, right? Because if you would have had another year of him, like he would have been an all Big Ten player. But his draft value was already to the point where it made sense for him to leave. So, I mean, there's a really delicate balance. And so I think he's probably struck really well here where Janikowski's a guy that, or Jankowski, however you pronounce it, he's a guy that I think after, by his second year could be a guy that's developed into, a top 50 draft pick. And if he's that good, then that's a home run for Nebraska. So I think he could be the perfect kind of mix to not be a one and done, but to be a potential NBA player down the road.
Quite honestly, I was very surprised at the time when Wisconsin allowed Nebraska to come in and get Janowski myself. But I think it's also important to get guys that are, high caliber players that also fit your system. I feel like, for example, Wilhelm Breidenbach didn't necessarily fit the Nebraska offensive system that Fred was trying to run. I think Jankowski does a much, better job, for example, of fitting. So I think the future is very bright for Nebraska basketball. And, I know there's always questions of, is Fred going to come back and blah, blah, blah. I think this year kind of solidified his post as Nebraska basketball coach for at least another year.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think he'll get an extension because they're going to, win at least 20 games. And, even if they don't make the tournament, I still think he'll get a new contract. So, because basically you get to the point where, if he doesn't have a new contract, then he almost can't recruit. So you can't have like a lame duck, because then, the sharks are in the water, so to speak. So Trev's basically going to have to make some sort of decision on Fred, and I think he's going to extend him. So anyway, let's shift our conversation to some football recruiting news. Still been a dead period or whatever, but there's been more visits getting scheduled. More guys are kind of trending up. There was some new offers out that Brady Schmiegel, Nebraska, offered him a 2026 quarterback. TJ Lateef, the 4-star, is setting up an official visit, I believe, for the spring game. So I think he is, in terms of 2025 quarterbacks, he's probably the guy I would look at right now. He's the only one with an official visit set up. And then, Cortez Mills is another name I wanted to mention. He, talked with Chad Simmons of On3 and mentioned Nebraska is one of the programs that's standing out to him. With Clemson is in the mix, LSU, Penn State, Florida State, Georgia, Miami. I do think that Nebraska losing Phil Simpson, might hurt them a little bit in that recruitment. But Cortez Mills, if you're talking about, the top of the recruiting board for Nebraska, I feel like he's right, near the top.
Yeah, he's a very dynamic playmaker. very fast, would fit this offense very well. Deep threat, but he's not limited to just the deep ball. Very good route runner. He's definitely at the top of my recruiting board, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Philip Simpson departure affects the Mills recruitment. Like you said, I don't think it's gonna affect it too much, but I think, and we've said this for years. I think once Nebraska starts winning, recruitments will be a lot easier, and I think we'll finally be able to turn the page this year. So I think maybe a guy like Mills would be a little bit easier to recruit. Especially with Dylan Raiola under center. So yeah, Mills is one I'm watching. He would definitely add to a loaded wide receiver room, and I think overall Nebraska is in good shape for the 2025 class. They've been really aggressive in recruiting, and I don't know if you saw this the other day, Chris, but the Tyson Terry wrestling video that was circulating around Twitter is just absolutely crazy. He is a animal in the best sense possible. The amount of leverage he got when he was able to take down his opponent, he was basically on his knees, and yet he lifted him up and just threw him to the mat, and it was incredible to watch. He's 136-0 through his junior season, so Tyson Terry is going to be an absolute stud.
Yeah, in terms of the guy that's already committed to Nebraska,
Yeah.
I think he'll be a guy that has a chance to play right away. I love wrestlers, that play football, especially defensive linemen. They just understand leverage and hand control and all that stuff that's really, important for a defensive lineman. You can see it all in display in that takedown. So, and the fact that, a lot of guys that, have a chance to be, 4-time champions, which I'm sure he will be next year. The only thing is I don't see him enrolling early. I don't see him passing up the opportunity to be a 4-time state wrestling champion to enroll early at Nebraska. So, that's one negative thing. But yeah, you got to finish that off. And a lot of guys, because I cover high school wrestling for, my day job. So a lot of wrestlers that end up being 4-time state champions, you don't see a lot of heavyweights do that because it is very difficult to, to come in as a freshman and to go undefeated as a heavyweight. That's impressive. And for him to just, run the gauntlet and dominate the way he has, he's going to be a really good football player. So I'm super, super excited about him. I think he's totally underranked by 24/7, but what else is new?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, nothing much there, nothing new there, but I'm really excited to see him come in and continue the strong defensive line play. We got Keona Wilhite, Tyson Terry for the future. I mean, Robinson and Hutmacher for now, and I think defensive line is going to be a position where we're just going to keep churning out talented players, and it's quite a cry from even just 3 years ago when we had trouble landing defensive linemen, and now it seems to be a major position of strength.
Yeah, he's going to be, Nash 2.0, maybe even better. I mean, I don't even want to limit his potential. I think he's going to be awesome. And then another guy who has Nebraska in his top 6 is Jack Lange. I'm not sure, Lange, not sure exactly how to pronounce that, but 6'8", 275 out of Eureka, Missouri in the 2025 class. Notre Dame does have a couple crystal balls for him. That happened, last month. From Tom Loy and, the Notre Dame reporter. But he's going to be visiting all 6 of the schools, that he mentioned, Michigan, Nebraska, Notre Dame, Missouri's in the mix. So a bunch of big name schools, made his cut list. I think for Nebraska, the priority, or I guess the priority in my mind, is he's coming for a visit March 24th. So that's going to be an unofficial visit. You got to get him back for an official visit, either the spring game or this summer. If they can do that, maybe this can follow, the Grant Bricks recruitment timeline where you kind of get him in that summer and then, you have a good season, or you're looking ahead to the season. I guess they wouldn't have him before the season, but at any rate, I feel like if they can get him for an official visit, they've got a chance. So, and they are getting him on campus March 24th. So that's a good thing.
13th overall offensive tackle in his class, second overall player overall in his class from the state of Missouri for 2025. 6'8", 275. He's an absolute mauler. He's an absolute physical offensive lineman. He fits the profile of the type of lineman that the Huskers have been recruiting. Like you said, big offer lists, some big schools, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Iowa. I mean, it seems like Notre Dame is really making a push, but he would be another really solid get for Nebraska. And, again, I think a lot of it hinges on what the program does this season. And I hate to put so much stock into one season, but I think if players see that, Bricks and Tamua get developed, if Dylan Raiola gets developed, if this player and that player gets developed well, then that might catch the attention of some other high school prospects. So I think a lot of it hinges on what happens on the field this season, and which is why I think this season is so big for the program.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, everything's pointing towards a big jump in on field wins and production and all that stuff. So I mean, they just have to deliver it. They have to deliver on the field. Matt Rule talked about it. We're a 5-7 team until we kick off against UTEP, and so there's a lot of hype. I know I get people wanting to temper it, but it is hard though, because you look at this team and all the pieces are in place. The coach, the quarterback, the defense. I mean, they didn't suffer any major losses from the coaching staff from 1 year to year two. So I mean, I think everything you've got everything that you would want and need for Nebraska football to finally take that step back into I just want to say respectability. Just I mean, Matt Rule talked about that last year. They've got to earn that respect back, like and it's time that when the Ohio States of the world and that those teams, when they look at Nebraska, that they're like, yeah, that's not going to be they don't just etch it up as a win anymore. And I don't think that they are, but it's time to beat somebody like that. That's really it's one thing to go out and beat Penn State, or not Penn State, but Purdue and Northwestern and Illinois, and that's one thing. That's all well and good, but if you're going to get respect back, like you got to start putting some what's the thing where they get the animals, some skins. You got to start putting some skins on your wall. You got to start beating the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Iowa. I mean, they did beat Iowa 2 years ago, but you got to beat Iowa in a big freaking game. You know what I mean? And take down USC. And once the pellets,
Oregon.
once Nebraska, Oregon, once they start getting some pellets up on their wall, then I think people will really start believing that Nebraska's back.
Yeah, and there's certain programs that are going to be good, or that are good for college football if they're back. Miami, Nebraska. I hate to say it, Notre Dame in the spotlight is, good for college football. Texas, I mean, with the 12-team playoff, we could see it happening. But Nebraska certainly fits into that group, and I just I always hear the gripe that we're living in the 90s, but there hasn't been a lot to celebrate since the 90s, and hopefully that changes in short order.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't won a conference championship since the 90s. Won a few division titles, a Big 10 division title, a couple of Big 12 division titles, but not those don't even exist anymore. So I mean, that's the crazy thing, is if this team ever does win a conference championship, it's almost going to feel like a national championship, just because I mean, I can't tell you how excited I would be if Nebraska won the Big 10 championship. I thought they were going to win it that 1 year when they played Wisconsin, then they lost. They gave up 70 points. So that was
the highlight of that game was
that was a rough night.
Was the block did Kenny Bell throw that block, or was he the receiver on that block? Like, did he run?
I think Taylor Martinez was the runner. I think that's what you're thinking about.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Taylor
and that was an awesome play, but
that was an awesome play. And then you looked at the score and it was like 70-21. It's like, okay.
And they had that run. I can't even remember which running back it was, but I'm like, anyway. So I mean, the fact that I would I can't even do flips or whatever, but I'd be doing backflips if Nebraska won the Big 10 championship, regardless of what happened in their postseason, because it's just been so long since they've won a championship I don't count division titles as a championship.
I'll tell you, if that defense plays like they did last season and the offense plays to what we think it can play, then we might be playing in December at the Big 10 championship.
Wouldn't shock me. I did have I had somebody message me on Facebook, and I just want to bring this up. They said like, oh, what do you think would be a good season for Dylan Raiola? And they mentioned, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, What do you think Nebraska's, if Dylan Raiola throws 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, what do you think Nebraska's record would be this season? I'm just curious.
Oh, probably 9-3. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
you mean coming up or like if he was there last season?
No, this season. I'm saying this season.
Yeah,
If this
9-3.
season, yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally. I agree. They're at least winning 8 games with that. If but probably 9-3. And if you're 9-3, like I really think as a Big Ten team, you're going to be in the mix because, like I don't know. I just if you look at the ACC, I mean, yeah, maybe I think maybe with some name value, Florida State and Miami and Clemson will carry some weight if they're like 10-2 or 11-1, but like the Big 12, yeesh. I mean, Utah or Kansas State might be your best team. Like, I just don't know how that's going to look, or I'm not sure how those teams are going to squeak their way into like the top 5 or the top 10.
Well, I think it's gonna be a big year for Avery Johnson, that's for sure. And
Yeah,
he's one I
he is
wanted for
good.
Nebraska, honestly. But and
I know. Yeah.
I think Mark Whipple recruited Avery Johnson, and then they just didn't seal the deal. So
Yeah, Kleiman did agree. He's done a really good job of keeping those players, the in-state players home. And I mean, because like Notre Dame was recruiting Avery Johnson, Oregon was after Avery Johnson, Michigan was after Avery Johnson, and Kansas State got him. So that was a big one for them.
yeah,
He's a dude. He's really there's a
yep.
reason why Will Howard went to the transfer portal, and it's not because of money. It's because Avery Johnson was going to start this year no matter what.
Well, I mean, I'm sure with the dollar figures being thrown around, the money was certainly not a detractor in going to Ohio State.
Oh no, I think the money definitely played a factor in where he was going, but I think he was leaving regardless because Avery Johnson was gonna. It was his time. It was like the Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith with the Chiefs, or I guess, or whatever. There's just you make the transition. It's time to go.
Or even though he got hurt, the Bledsoe Brady transition, because even if Bledsoe didn't get hurt, I think the writing was on the wall for Drew.
Yeah, yeah. It was interesting how that all played out. And then I remember the next year they traded Drew to the Bills, and then the Bills like smoked. Remember that first? It was like week
Oh yeah,
one, and they
31 to
won like
nothing.
31
Bledsoe
nothing.
and Lawyer Malloy, and then
Yeah,
Patriots beat him on the back end of the season in the last game, 31 nothing. So it all worked out.
yeah. It was funny though but people were kind of making fun of Bill Belichick at that time, but whatever. Bill Belichick still, I still think he's one of the 2 to 3 greatest, NFL head coaches of all time.
It's not Bill Belichick, the coach, that got him let go. It's Bill Belichick, the general manager. And the fact that he wants complete control scared away a lot of teams.
Yeah.
So I think Bill Belichick, the general manager, ultimately did himself in. So
Yeah, I agree. Here's the thing though, is like I don't. I'm really. Oh my god! I totally forgot that Patriots documentary started last Friday. I got
yep.
to go watch that now.
See, I don't want
No
to pay for
spoilers.
another
No
streaming
spoilers.
service. I don't know.
Oh yeah, because it's on Apple. I'm already suckered in with Apple TV. So here's my thing. Here's
Oh,
why I
okay.
got Apple TV, because I had it before. I really like Severance. It's a great series.
Oh yeah.
And then also I wanted to watch that Flower Moon movie, which is like if you want to buy it, it's like $20. And
Damn.
so at the same time, Apple's only $9 a month or like $10 a month, and then you get that movie for free with it. So I was like, well, I'm just going to pay for Apple for a month, and then I'll watch these other shows while I get this movie for half off. So, you know,
See,
just
like I have 75 streaming services, and it's almost like, do I cut cable or is cable cheaper at this point? I think cable's cheaper at this point.
yeah, I don't know, man. It's definitely a rabbit hole. I got way too many, but whatever. At any rate,
Well, it's because all the games are on like Peacock and
yeah,
exclusively on Amazon Prime, and this
I
one's
know
on Twitch. And I know I sound like an old dude, but it's really annoying.
it's getting worse too. Yeah,
It's well, they know people will buy. Then
pretty
you've got
soon they're
this
pretty
game
soon they're gonna
on.
have yeah they're gonna have the college football playoff on like Amazon streaming service.
Then you got this game on Apple TV, and I don't
I
know.
know, man. It is hard. It's hard to be. It's a great time to be a sports fan, but it's also a hard time because you can't just like turn on the old TV and
Yeah.
you got to have like 27 streaming apps to make
And
sure you
people
got
made the
your
argument for pay-per-view, but even pay-per-view is more centralized
yeah.
than all this stuff.
Even like I had to order a UCF or UFC. God, I sound so whatever it is. I sound so old for work because Sean, Sugar Sean or Shane O'Malley or whatever's from where I live.
Yep.
God, I sound like such a jackass. But anyway, I was like trying to figure out how to order it, and it was not that easy. It was like took me a little while to figure out how to do this ESPN Plus, and then I had to get ESPN Plus, and then I had to order it
Yep.
on the app. It was like a whole. I had to make like 10. I had to like log into it. It was a whole pain in the ass. I'm like, what happened to the days where I could just go to like channel 0 on my TV and pay $70? It took me like 2 seconds.
The technology is out advancing us, and it's annoying.
Yeah, that's sad. But anyways,
But for the baseball games this weekend, there were Twitter feeds that showed the baseball game for free. And so if I happen to stumble upon any of those, I will post it on my Facebook page and Husker Big Red's Facebook page, and you can watch them on Twitter. Because the other thing is these games, like Friday's game was on at like 1 in the afternoon my time.
yeah.
So
my recommendation is just go to Huskers.com, man. It's free. It's free radio broadcasting, and baseball is a great game to have on the radio. So just pop on the old headphones and catch the radio broadcast if you don't want to pay for it. Same with basketball, man. So that's what I do. I don't want to pay the extra like Big Ten Plus. I just go to Huskers.com and stream the radio broadcast for free. So that's my 2 cents.
that works too. I'm more of a visual person. I like.
But if you can get a stream for free, I'm not saying I won't watch it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just a mess. All the streaming services is a mess. But you won't find us on Apple TV or Amazon Prime or any of these. You'll find us right here with as much Nebraska news as possible, because it seems like there's never a dull moment around here. Never a dull moment. So like and subscribe to this channel. We appreciate the support, and I kind of just let us out without letting you have your 2 cents. So you have any final thoughts here, Chris?
I think we covered it all, but yeah, it's a 365 day job to be a fan now. So make sure you follow us, because we're on the
hardest
front
job
lines.
in the one of the hardest jobs in the country if you're a Nebraska fan. But
it is a hard job. It's a lot of emotional ups and downs. Being a true fan is not easy. It's not for the faint at heart. I'll say that.
So, and when are we gonna do our next show? When are you thinking? Because you got some exciting news. So
yeah, we'll probably do Saturday, because I'm expecting a new little Husker fan. So I'm having a daughter on Wednesday. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll probably catch up on Saturday if I can wake up for that.
And if not, don't worry about it. I understand your sleeping schedule is probably going to be all sorts of messed up. So
probably, but yeah. So we'll have another Big Red supporter for this fall. So hopefully she brings some good luck. Hopefully she's
coming into the world at the right time. Dylan Raiola. It could be this could be her equivalent of the '90s for her. So
hopefully she breaks the curse, man.
Maybe she could, and then maybe ask your wife if you can have another one so we can win a national championship. And then just keep going.
You might have to. We'll see what happens. But at any rate, guys, thanks. Hopefully you check out HuskerBigRed.com as well, and like and subscribe. We really appreciate all the support. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.